Another day, another banger. Today, we're diving into Station 11, where 99% of humanity is wiped out in just 3 weeks. Fast forward 20 years, and the few survivors are piecing together what happened, thanks to a mysterious comic book. It's a wild ride of survival, mystery, and unexpected connections. So, sit back, relax, and as always, enjoy the recap. Season 1 opens during a performance of King Lear. Jeevan Chowdhury is watching the play when the lead actor, Arthur Leander, has a heart attack on stage. Jeevan rushes to help despite not being a doctor. A young actress named Kirsten Raymond watches as medical professionals try to save Arthur, but he dies. Since Kirsten's usual caretaker Tanya left in the ambulance with Arthur, and her parents aren't there, Jeevan offers to help her. As they try to figure out what to do, they meet Miranda, who gives Arthur's son Kiki a book called Station 11. Kirsten has a copy of this book in her backpack. While trying to get Kirsten home, Jeevan receives a frantic call from his sister Sia, a doctor. She warns him about a dangerous flu spreading rapidly through the city after a teenager from Moscow arrived with unusual symptoms. Sia tells Jeevan to find their brother Frank and barricade themselves inside. Jeevan has a panic attack at this news and gets off the bus at the wrong stop with Kirsten. They try to go to Kirsten's house, but her parents aren't home and she can't get in. Meanwhile, someone named Miranda learns about Arthur's death, and her friend decides not to attend the funeral because he didn't know Arthur and his work. Jeevan takes Kirsten to a grocery store, where he spends over $9,000 on supplies. He warns the cashier to go home because of the flu. At the hospital, Sia is questioning sick children and discussing the situation with a coworker. They haven't heard from the CDC, and chaos erupts outside the hospital as people rush in for help. Outside the store, Jeevan explains to Kirsten about the health crisis and offers to either call her a cab or take her to his brother's place. When Kirsten wants to go home, Jeevan makes up a fake message from her parents saying they're stuck in Lake Forest and she should stay with him. They push their grocery carts through the city, encountering a sick man in a car whom Jeevan prevents from getting out. They arrive at Frank's apartment building on the 42nd floor, refusing to let another woman onto their elevator. Frank is surprised by all the groceries, but before they can discuss it further, they witness a plane crash nearby. Jeevan locks them inside the apartment as instructed by Sia, and they hear people making phone calls to loved ones. The story jumps ahead 80 days. Jeevan and Kirsten leave the apartment, finding the building's security guard dead at his desk. They walk out into a snow-covered city, heading toward the lake. The scene shifts to someone in a spacesuit on a space station, listening to radio frequencies that include Jeevan and Kirsten's earlier introductions. The episode ends by jumping many years into the future, showing an adult Kirsten lying on the ground, reading the Station 11 book that shows a picture of the spacesuit. A man without arms calls her to rehearsal, and she says she'll be there in a minute. Throughout this first episode, we see the beginning of what appears to be a devastating pandemic, how it brings Jeevan and Kirsten together, and glimpses of both the immediate aftermath and the far future. The episode moves between different time periods, showing the night of Arthur's death and the start of the pandemic, 80 days later when Jeevan and Kirsten leave Frank's apartment, and many years later when Kirsten is an adult. The Station 11 book appears as a recurring element, first as a gift and later as something the adult Kirsten still keeps with her. The narrative follows how a chance encounter between Jeevan and Kirsten during a theater performance leads to them sheltering together as society begins to collapse due to a fast-spreading flu. We see the immediate chaos of the pandemic start, with Sia at the overwhelmed hospital, people panic buying at stores, and the breakdown of normal services as shown by the plane crash. The episode also establishes that some people survive this event, as shown by the future scenes with adult Kirsten, though the world appears to have changed dramatically. Season 1 Episode 2 opens in year 2 after the pandemic, where young Kirsten is alone with her Station 11 book. She encounters Sarah, a woman with a gun who becomes friendly after realizing Kirsten isn't a threat. Sarah shares her Cheez-Its and water, revealing she was a musician before the pandemic. Sarah explains she's part of the Traveling Symphony, a group that performs Shakespeare plays. She tells Kirsten they travel to burn the house down and make the world make sense. She warns that their director hates children but acknowledges they're the best actors. The story jumps to year 20, where adult Kirsten is with the symphony. At their camp, Charlie is heavily pregnant, and Dan auditions to join the group. Despite their rule of only performing Shakespeare, Dan performs a 4th of July piece about fighting for freedom. After the group cheers, Dieter adds him to the roster. The symphony parades through St. Deborah by the water, where locals warmly welcome them back. In flashbacks, young Kirsten tries desperately to contact her parents by phone while staying with Jeevan and Frank. News reports mention 10,000 deaths from the flu. Frank assures her things will return to normal since they still have power. Kirsten moves to sleep in a closet and reads Station 11 with Frank, who says he loves a good comeback story. In the present, Kirsten goes swimming with Alexandra and Saeed. They meet David and his friend, who say they've seen Kirsten perform at Mackinac Island. David has a son named Cody and talks about his wife Rose's recent death in Detroit, where they unsuccessfully searched for medicine. During their conversation, David says a suspicious line, "To the monsters, we're the monsters." The group returns to camp after seeing a flare signal. Kirsten notices a suspicious wire under a traffic sign on her way back. At camp, she receives a switchblade from August and learns that Charlie and Jeremy plan to stay in town for a year because of Charlie's baby. Kirsten argues it's not safe anywhere, mentioning wolves could attack. Charlie goes into labor, and Kirsten helps get her to Karen, the midwife. That evening, they perform Hamlet. Dan struggles with playing Queen Gertrude, but Kirsten helps by sharing Arthur's acting advice about focusing on the other person. During the performance, flashbacks show young Kirsten discovering messages on her father's phone revealing her parents' deaths at Lakeview Memorial Hospital. The final message warns them not to come to the hospital. The news devastates her, and Jeevan and Frank try to comfort her as she sobs. After the show, an emissary invites the symphony to perform at the Museum of Civilization on Midsummer's Eve. Sarah angrily refuses, insisting they never leave their regular route, which they call the Wheel. The symphony celebrates with music, and Alexandra sings a dirge for David's wife as promised. Dieter talks with a woman about being single, while Kirsten holds Charlie's newborn baby. The episode climaxes when Kirsten confronts David, who makes disturbing comments about joining the symphony. She threatens him with a knife when he hints at knowing about her past, pointing out his lies about mushrooms and the island's pronunciation. When he mentions the prophecy and uses a phrase from Station 11, "I remember damage," she stabs him in the side. He warns that her friends will start disappearing. The next morning, Kirsten finds David gone, being wheeled away by Cody. Throughout the episode, the story alternates between Kirsten's traumatic early days in the pandemic with Jeevan and Frank, and her present life protecting the symphony. The episode introduces new threats through David's character and the mysterious Museum of Civilization invitation, suggesting dangers to their traveling way of life. Episode 3 opens in Chicago 2005, where Miranda Carroll interviews for a logistics job with Leon. When asked about her strongest quality, she says listening and organizing because she remembers everything. Leon recognizes her from Kankakee and offers her the job after she says in 20 years she'll either still be working for him or they'll all be dead. In Chicago 2020, Leon sends Miranda to Malaysia for a Sinotech pitch. Before leaving, she visits Arthur to deliver her finished Station 11 graphic novel. Young Kirsten asks about the person on the cover, and Arthur jokingly says it's the person who ruined his life. Flashbacks show Miranda and Arthur's first meeting at a cafe in 2005. Arthur offers to buy her artwork for $1,000 as a birthday gift for his friend. Though she refuses, Miranda gives him a banana drawing and follows him to Clark's birthday party. At the party, Miranda discusses her artwork while Clark explains his relationship with Arthur, saying Arthur often finds fascinating strangers at bars. In 2020 Malaysia, Miranda discovers chaos as the pandemic begins. The receptionist dons a gas mask, communications fail, and their pitch meeting gets cancelled. Leon calls Miranda's satellite phone, warning about the mutated flu and arranging her escape on a tanker called Robespierre. He sends her a package with boat keys, a butterfly knife, and supplies. Her colleague Jim dismisses the danger, planning to golf instead. More flashbacks show Miranda and Arthur's growing relationship. She visits his grandmother's house, shares stories about her father sailing with whale sharks, and discusses her childhood before Hurricane Hugo. Arthur invites her to California, and they attend Hollywood events together. In 2007, at a Hollywood party, Elizabeth tells Miranda she claimed to be having an affair with Arthur to deflect media attention. Miranda focuses on her logistics work while Arthur's career grows. He answers calls about legal issues while she works on her spaceman drawings. They argue about her work travel to Perth and his 4-month movie shoots. At a crucial dinner party, guests discuss travel while Clark talks about his failed acting career. Miranda learns Arthur showed her private artwork to guests without permission. She discovers Arthur's real affair with Elizabeth during the dinner. After reciting lines about burning parasites alive from her book, Miranda sets fire to the pool house, burning her artwork before leaving. Back in 2020, Miranda tries reaching the escape boat but drops the keys in water after learning about Arthur's death. She returns to the hotel and watches pandemic news with others. During her pitch to Huang and the Sinotech team, she abandons the presentation to talk about Arthur's death, regretting not being at his final performance. The episode shows Miranda's complete path, her logistics career, relationship with Arthur, development of Station 11, and final days. Arthur becomes a successful actor while Miranda travels for work. Their relationship suffers from his growing fame and her dedication to her art and career. Later, Miranda gives Arthur another copy of her book for his son Tyler, whom he had with Elizabeth. Jim and Miranda help each other face the pandemic's reality, getting room sealing kits from the front desk. While sealed in her room, Miranda lies to Leon about escaping on the boat. She seals her room carefully as the pandemic spreads. The episode shows several calls between Miranda and Arthur over the years, revealing their complex relationship and eventual separation. In her final moments, Miranda has visions of her spaceman character from Station 11. She accepts her fate in the hotel room, saying she has found her character 9 times and will find him again. Through different time periods, we see her creating the graphic novel that becomes significant to young Kirsten. Her story ends as she delivers her book to Arthur before his death, though she regrets not being present for his final moments in King Lear. The episode concludes with Miranda's vision of the spaceman entering her room. She says she has a job to do but has found him 9 times and will find him again. She declares there is no rescue mission because they're already safe, accepting her fate as the pandemic claims its victims. Episode 4 opens with various voices reading lines from Miranda's book while showing Kirsten at different ages. We see Miranda Carroll and young Kirsten with a white and red hat, then shift to older Kirsten riding in a pickup truck with Alexandra. Alex discusses David's week-long disappearance while Kirsten sharpens her knife. They debate whether David's dead wife Rose was real, with August suggesting she didn't exist. The traveling symphony reaches Petoskey Station, where Dieter announces completing Wendy's Hamlet adaptation set in Portland. Dan learns about Pinktree, a golf course where professors and Gil, their second founding member, live. They explain how Gil had a relationship with Katrina, leading to Sarah shooting him when she found out, ending their Pinktree visits. Brian cycles up to them, prompting everyone to yell stranger than no danger. He again invites them to the Museum of Civilization, showing Sarah a CD she recorded. Alexandra, while doing cartwheels, finds a warning note about David/the Prophet and his dangerous children's cult. She tells Kirsten how David spoke about post-pandemic children being special and free of trauma, unlike the surviving liars. In Year 1 flashbacks, Jeevan and young Kirsten discuss Station 11 while he cuts meat. He suggests scavenging for new books, admitting he doesn't understand Station 11 despite playing the main character. Kirsten tries explaining the book's monsters to the monsters concept, comparing it to Jeevan's wolf encounters. At Pinktree, they find everything unchanged, including fake minefields. They discuss the red bandanas, crystal meth militias who once tried taking over. Gil and Katrina arrive in a golf cart, warning about reinstalled mines due to the Prophet. Gil explains how the Prophet first appeared with a boy on crutches, then returned repeatedly with different children and stories, eventually stealing Pinktree's 4 children, Michael, Annie, Brett Olson, and Penelope. During dinner, Gil argues with Dieter about acting quality and their use of weapons. Sarah announces Wendy's deconstructed Hamlet, with Alex as lead. The new version includes camcorders and modern elements, causing tension between Alex and Kirsten during rehearsal. Children watch from a nearby hill. Kirsten retrieves Station 11 from Gil's office, discussing his book of joy and despair and oral history attempts. She invites him back to the symphony, but he refuses, wanting to stay with Katrina. Alex later confesses the Prophet invited her to leave the symphony, but she stayed to be the lead actress. During the Hamlet performance, mysterious figures move behind the scoreboard. The play becomes intensely personal, with Kirsten and Alex's confrontation feeling real. Katrina later tells Kirsten the symphony brought new life to Pinktree but admits their fear of the Prophet. Alex and Kirsten argue about the symphony's rigid ways, with Alex calling them a carnival of trauma. Despite Kirsten's protests, Alex plans a night ride. Meanwhile, Sarah and Gil reconcile over her old CD, discussing their past relationship and her father's death. The episode climaxes when Kirsten encounters a child wearing what they call a beacon for the Prophet, actually a mine. She races through the building warning others. Gil finds Penelope, also wearing a mine, in his house. As Dieter steps on Sarah's glasses by the piano, the children hug Gil, leading to an apparent explosion. The episode ends with parallel scenes, young Kirsten finding Station 11 in a Ziploc bag and calling for Jeevan, while present Kirsten screams for her friends. Throughout the credits, we hear David's lighter clicking repeatedly, suggesting his continued presence and threat. Episode 5 opens with Tyler Leander playing with a lighter while reading Station 11. His mother Elizabeth desperately tries reaching him by radio as he approaches a plane with a gas can. Through the radio, she explains that this is just grown-up stuff and Clark is worried about him too. The story flashes back to day 1, showing Clark on a plane playing with a lighter. He notices Elizabeth but she sits elsewhere. Clark uses a rolling soccer ball as an excuse to talk with her, where another passenger recognizes Elizabeth from Alpha/Beta. They discuss Arthur's shocking death, which Tyler doesn't yet know about. Elizabeth mentions her lawyer called during a layover. The plane gets diverted to Severn City Airport due to an issue, and Brian intervenes when Clark and Elizabeth are talking, though Elizabeth says it's fine since Clark is just a fan. At the airport, Clark texts Tim saying he shouldn't have left and will try getting home quickly. He offers Elizabeth a ride, but she declines, planning to get a private jet with her assistant. Clark meets the nanny Shay and bumps into security guard Miles. He witnesses growing chaos and watches news coverage telling people to use back roads and head to safety. A nun nearby comments that God must have a plan. Clark receives a phone call about the severity of the flu but lacks a charger. Shay informs him new planes aren't letting passengers off due to illness, debating with Clark about passengers' rights versus survival. Clark watches Elizabeth take photos with a fan and jokes with another passenger about fame being meaningless if everyone dies. He approaches Tyler, who's reading about the flu's high fatality rate, and reaffirms his role as Uncle Clark. 7 days in, survivors are living in the airport. A man introducing himself as Agent Nick Roker from Homeland Security emerges as a leader, talking about zombies and looking for skilled people. Clark finds a keycard, enters the control room, and receives a final voicemail from a sick Tim. He confronts Elizabeth about her unrealistic hopes for a private jet rescue and warns that Tyler needs attention, sitting in front of a plane full of corpses. Clark discovers Nick is actually Jerry Mercer, a custodian, after finding his real ID and a bag of pills. Jerry convinces several people, including the airport soccer team, Brian, and Shay to leave for Miami Beach. Clark exposes Jerry's deception to the remaining survivors, showing them the evidence and positioning himself as a leader by pointing out they now have more food and resources. Tyler reveals he can still access the internet through a German satellite at night, offering to download Wikipedia pages. By day 10, Tyler helps children cope by having them talk to Santa about dead people. Clark tries this himself, talking to Arthur through headphones about Tyler's behavior. Miles announces the power grid's failure but suggests using solar panels and batteries for sustainable electricity. He attempts to kiss Clark, who initially refuses, claiming he's in mourning, though they kiss later. Elizabeth gives Tyler his father's gift, a copy of Station 11. She confesses to burning letters Arthur had sent Tyler since their divorce. When Tyler brings in a sick survivor from a quarantine plane, claiming the man is immune, Miles shoots him dead. Clark orders Tyler and Elizabeth quarantined in a private plane for a month. After their release on day 42, they must wear masks to make others comfortable. On day 100, the vernal equinox, Clark creates a museum of old electronics as something to aim for. Elizabeth warns that Tyler has stopped sleeping, leading to an argument where Clark expresses his complicated feelings about Arthur, calling him a B-list loser while admitting he still loved him. Unknown to them, Tyler hears this through the radio. The episode concludes with Tyler setting fire to a plane while reading Station 11 and playing with Clark's lighter. Elizabeth tries running toward the burning plane but is held back. A flash forward shows Tyler, now known as the Prophet, watching Kirsten's play, before returning to the past to show young Tyler walking away from the burning plane. Episode 6 opens with older Kirsten searching frantically for Alexandra while shouting her name. The scene shifts between present-day Kirsten and flashbacks of her younger self searching. Young Kirsten finds herself near golf equipment, where Gil sits at a table. Gil, not knowing her name yet, discusses a book started by someone with a red bandana, explaining it was a bloody rag people would cough into while dying. He tells her Alex likes running away and announces they'll perform The Tempest that night. He suggests they could settle there, create art, and stop running. Young Kirsten promises to get rid of the book that distracted her, finally telling Gil her name. In the present, Saeed finds Kirsten, who tells him the Prophet killed Gil and they're stealing mines. She removes something from her arm and suggests the Prophet might have Alexandra. They discover a fire with makeshift crosses, identifying one as Dieter's grave and another as S's, while finding a rock with Kirsten's name. She fears the Prophet plans to kill the traveling symphony.
He might have Alex.
At Pinktree, survivors handle the explosion's aftermath. Dieter explains the burned gas station was their meeting point and gives someone a pair of glasses. A local woman asks them to stay a few days. Sarah, drunk, insists they'll find their people and move on. They learn Alex wasn't missing but had been crying with Katrina after being thrown from Kirsten's horse. Sarah shoots flares into the sky to signal their location to Kirsten and Saeed. Seeing the flares, Kirsten and Saeed realize Alex must be safe with the others. Kirsten blames herself for not killing the Prophet when she stabbed him, explaining how he got into Alex's head. Despite Saeed's suggestion to wait, Kirsten follows tracks she finds. As dark clouds gather, she takes shelter in a makeshift tent, reading the Station 11 comic and remembering calling for Jeevan as a child. The others reach the gas station cemetery. Saeed reveals Alex thought she had joined a cult, though Alex argues she's already in one. Dieter becomes angry learning Saeed let Kirsten go after the prophet. Alex admits she was going to listen to the prophet until Kirsten stabbed him. Brian arrives with armed companions, inviting them to perform at the Museum of Civilization.
No worries. She stabbed him.
He mentions their friends accepted, including Vlad, who complains a lot. Sarah agrees, leaving her glasses and the invitation behind. Kirsten continues alone, seeing someone running and losing her horse, Luli. She finds an abandoned wheelchair before encountering children from the undersea. One wears a space helmet, calling himself Dr. 11, while others test her knowledge of the prophecy from Station 11. After she recites the correct words, they show her the museum invitation and lead her to the prophet's location. The prophet, David, is injured from Kirsten's stabbing. He tells her the Museum of Civilization holds real evil, explaining how Haley told the kids a different story about minds erasing the past. He reveals half of Kirsten's friends are already prisoners. David needs her help getting inside the heavily guarded museum, offering to lead her to the symphony in exchange. He explains they have snipers and electric fences, but she could enter by pretending to be an actor. At the museum, Brian guides Sarah and the others through a dark passage to quarantine. Sarah becomes dizzy seeing the working elevator and collapses, telling Dieter his soul is sweet and she's glad he fell in love because it made him stop working so much. David reads to the children at their camp. When a light crosses the sky, he claims it's 11 working with Lonergan.
There.
After the children sleep, David tells Kirsten about receiving the comic as a child, losing it, and remembering it when needed most. He shares a story about his father's first wife, an artist who spoke Spanish, revealing how his father never really knew her until after she left. The next morning, they head toward the museum. Kirsten talks with a boy wearing a love shirt about the internet, which he believes is inside the museum on a small black device. He explains David's importance to the undersea's survival, revealing it took 10 years to build their community. The boy fears they won't survive without David, saying others will find them. Suddenly, red bandanas attack the group. David tries protecting the children while Kirsten fights back. Something hits her wrist during the fight, and she watches helplessly as the boy in the love shirt gets killed. Though she manages to kill his attacker, it's too late to save the boy. The episode ends with Kirsten surrounded by red bandanas, while elsewhere, Alex stands concerned by the museum's fence, separated from the others. Episode 7 opens with Kirsten waking up surrounded by dead red bandanas. She sees her younger self searching the bodies for supplies. Young Kirsten warns that she's dying from poison shot into her by one of the attackers. When adult Kirsten tries to suck the poison from her skin, young Kirsten reveals she has the antidote but runs away instead of giving it. Following her leads to a strange door, and Kirsten notices the poison spreading through her veins before entering. The door takes her to memories of the apartment she shared with Frank and Jeevan. She watches as the city lights go out, with young Kirsten comparing it to a spaceship. Jeevan discusses their dwindling food supply and the need to eventually leave, warning that by spring, people will fight over resources. The scene shifts to when they first arrived at Frank's apartment. Frank initially resists having them there, trying to hide his drugs before they arrive. They watch news about Paris burning and a coup in China, with Frank optimistically saying everything will return to normal since they still have power. Frank speaks to Jeevan in Hindi about Kirsten slowly realizing her parents are dead, while Jeevan reminds him their sister is also dead. They agree to focus on helping Kirsten. In another memory, 75 days before their play, Frank gives Kirsten the closet as her room, explaining kids like small spaces because they make the world seem smaller.
Merry Christmas.
Jeevan discovers Frank's heroin and confronts him privately. Frank admits starting 10 months ago but claims he quit, explaining he needs it to ghostwrite and can't write novels because he doesn't make things up. The memories continue showing their life in the apartment. During Christmas, young Kirsten sings to lift their spirits as they learn about the flu's 1 in 1,000 survival rate. 79 days before the play, Frank shares his story with Kirsten about losing his leg to a landmine in Sri Lanka while writing for Vanity Fair. He describes looking up to see his guide running away before stepping on the mine, then waking up in a Singapore military hospital with Jeevan by his side, who had flown there on Sia's credit card. Frank creates a moment of joy by performing a rap song he heard on some tapes, leading to all of them dancing together. The day before their play, Jeevan announces they only have 12 days of food left and must leave tomorrow. Frank refuses to go, saying he hasn't finished his autobiography, while Kirsten insists on performing her play before leaving. Adult Kirsten watches Jeevan talking to himself in a makeshift tent, believing he's speaking to Sia about convincing Frank to leave. Jeevan searches nearby apartments, finding a radio and an open window. Young Kirsten notes the smell of dead bodies outside. Frank gives Kirsten his grandfather's compass as a late Christmas present, explaining it always points east. Kirsten reveals she's written his death scene into the play, with Frank playing Lonergan. They begin rehearsing the play as Jeevan finds a radio and hears people talking about bodies filling the Mississippi River.
I don't know how they got in there, but it's plugged up.
Frank tells Jeevan in Hindi that he won't survive trying to help both of them, but Kirsten needs Jeevan to live. They perform the play, with Jeevan in a spacesuit as Dr. 11. In the play, young Kirsten puts a knife to Lonergan's throat, demanding he turn on the engines, then kills him when he refuses. During the performance, a stranger enters the apartment, demanding they leave. Frank refuses to go, apologizing to Jeevan before standing his ground. The stranger stabs Frank, and a fight breaks out between Jeevan and the intruder. Adult Kirsten watches, remembering Frank reading Station 11 to her. She tells her younger self that it isn't her fault and Jeevan survives. Frank pulls out the knife but is fatally wounded. As he dies, he tells Jeevan that Sia is dead and asks to lie down in his bed. After placing Frank's body in bed, Jeevan cleans his spacesuit in the bathtub. Kirsten comforts him, and he admits he thought the play was good. Adult Kirsten tells her younger self she must go with Jeevan now. As they prepare to leave, Kirsten tells Jeevan he played Dr. 11 well, revealing she almost cast him as Lonergan instead. She explains the book continues with stories of Dr. 11 and the rebel undersea leader. Young Kirsten takes the large knife before departing.
You have to go with Jeevan.
In the present, adult Kirsten says goodbye to Frank one last time before leaving to deal with the poison in her system. Episode 8 opens with Elizabeth standing near the burned airplane remains, talking to herself as if addressing Tyler. She mentions their upcoming premiere in 3 days at Midsummer, noting Clark seems accepting of the traveling symphony's presence. She expresses regret that Tyler never saw her this excited, feeling he only saw her as the bad guy. Adult Kirsten wakes up from her poison-induced state, checking her now healed wrist, after young Kirsten's voice discusses Miranda's book and its 5 published copies. David appears, startling Kirsten, who throws a knife at him. He reveals she killed all the red bandanas, but they poisoned her with dirty chemistry that makes people see ghosts. Kirsten confirms she saw memories from her first 100 days. They discuss Cody's death, and Tyler shows her a bag of airport security cameras. While walking to the airport, Tyler explains he burned his copy of Station 11 but remembers the words. He says the airport people won't recognize him since they think he's dead. Miles captures them at gunpoint, and Kirsten claims they're actors with the traveling symphony. Meanwhile, Clark teaches children about a karaoke machine in Elizabeth's classroom, sharing his experiences as an actor. He discusses quarantine procedures for the upcoming performers, leading to a disagreement with Elizabeth about whether such precautions are still necessary. Elizabeth argues nobody is sick anymore, but Clark insists the procedures keep people calm. Clark interrogates Kirsten and Tyler in the tower, making them perform to verify their identities. They recite lines from Station 11.
Want to open the doors.
During which Tyler secretly takes a gaming system. The scene triggers flashbacks to when Kirsten first met Clark in Arthur's dressing room years ago, where Arthur introduced her as his understudy and discussed her sad home life with Clark. Kirsten reunites with her group and learns Sarah had a heart attack and is being treated inside. The group reveals they're staying at the museum, with Elizabeth directing them in Sarah's absence. They explain Elizabeth offered them houses, and August received a sewing machine. Dieter mentions they can stay until winter and Sarah recovers. Kirsten discovers Elizabeth was Arthur Leander's wife and a movie star. Clark expresses concerns to Elizabeth about allowing the performance, worried about its effect on teenagers after seeing Hamlet's disrespect toward power structures. His worry triggers flashbacks to a dinner with Arthur where they discuss their past friendship, Miranda's book, and their complicated relationship. Clark had recently become sober then, though Arthur didn't remember. They argued about Miranda's creative process and Arthur's effect on people. Multiple flashbacks show Clark's deteriorating friendship with Arthur, including scenes of Clark's wild behavior, drug use, and a meeting where Tyler first called him uncle. The episode reveals the complex dynamics between Clark, Arthur, and Elizabeth, as well as Clark's relationship with Miles and their role in building the Museum of Civilization. Tyler leads Kirsten through the jetways to Sarah's room, where Sarah reveals she's dying and asks Kirsten to keep it secret until after the play. Outside, they find a memorial for Flight 452 passengers who were quarantined on their plane while sick. This prompts Tyler to share his memories of reading Station 11 while playing with his lighter, and hearing Clark say it was time for him and Elizabeth to leave. Kirsten tells Tyler about her connection to Arthur Leander and how important Station 11 became to her during the pandemic. She shares how Arthur talked about his son and gave her the book,
Because it was the world.
explaining how it became her entire world during the difficult times. She suggests Tyler didn't return just for the gaming system, saying they all survived. Tyler responds by pouring gas on the memorial and setting it fire, while using the gaming device for something else. Elizabeth recognizes Tyler and touches his face, asking him to speak. When Clark arrives with armed backup, Tyler denounces them both, blaming Clark for bringing everything back. He uses the device to trigger explosions in the tower. Brian knocks Tyler unconscious and tells Elizabeth he'll handle him, while Clark cries over losing the museum. The episode ends with people walking through grass while Kirsten tells Frank that the story ends without a proper conclusion, and Frank asks what she thought of it, rather than what the author intended. This mirrors the larger themes of stories, endings, and interpretations running throughout the episode. Episode 9 opens in year 1, with young Kirsten and Jeevan discovering their Snowdon road has been plowed. Jeevan recounts the 7 people they've encountered: a plow driver, someone in the cornfields who ran away, 2 bandana meth guys, a woman without eyes, and an older couple on jet skis. Kirsten demonstrates her hunting skills by shooting a deer with a rifle, which Jeevan butchers while she reads Station 11. Jeevan suggests they should go scavenging since the road is clear, but Kirsten refuses to leave. At night, Jeevan makes radio contact with a woman needing medical help, and he pretends to be a doctor.
What's your name? I'm Jeevan Chaudhry.
Kirsten practices throwing her knife, mentioning Frank called him Leavin' Jeevan. While scavenging, Jeevan finds a house with a computer and electronic piano that plays recorded messages from a little girl. A woman shoots Jeevan with a beanbag, discovering popsicle sticks marked Dr. 11 under his jacket. He fights back, but Kirsten, absorbed in reading, misses his calls for help. Later, Jeevan throws Kirsten's Station 11 book into the snow, frustrated with her constant reading. They discover their rabbit trap has been raided by Big Daddy. That night, while watching a movie, Jeevan expresses concern about staying isolated through winter. He secretly retrieves the book but is attacked by a wolf. 18 days before winter solstice, a motorcyclist named Lara finds him injured and takes him to a building full of pregnant women. There, he meets Terry, who runs the makeshift maternity hospital. Despite Jeevan's protests that he isn't really a doctor, Terry keeps him there. He discovers they've amputated part of his foot due to the wolf attack. The woman he spoke to on the radio arrives, revealing she went back to look for Kirsten but found no one. 2 days before winter solstice, Jeevan tries to leave but ends up helping when a pregnant woman collapses outside. He observes Terry performing a C-section and later joins the women in celebration. Terry reveals she lost her medical license for running a Ponzi scheme with orderlies. They bond over their losses, with Jeevan sharing about Frank's death.
I don't want anybody else to die.
On the winter solstice, multiple women go into labor. Jeevan helps deliver several babies, including a set of twins. He assists with complicated births, including Rose's difficult delivery where the baby's shoulder is stuck. Rose dies during childbirth, though her baby survives. Her partner David arrives too late and leaves, saying there is no before. Terry gives Jeevan 2 name tags, one reading Dr. 11 and another Dr. Chaudhry, revealing her real name as Deborah. Lara offers to drive Jeevan back to his cabin. There, he finds only Kirsten's compass and has an emotional breakdown, with a vision of Frank comforting him and assuring him Kirsten will find someone. The episode ends 20 years later, showing an older Jeevan as an established doctor. He searches for a dropped stethoscope with someone named Key. He says goodbye to Lara and a girl named Audie, promising to return from his house calls, and walks toward boats as the episode concludes. Throughout the episode, we see flashbacks of Kirsten hugging Jeevan and Jeevan hugging Frank, along with glimpses of Kirsten walking alone towards someone in a blue spacesuit, suggesting her eventual path after leaving the cabin. Episode 10 opens with Miranda talking to Arthur and young Kirsten about her graphic novel, giving Arthur an extra copy for Tyler. In her Malaysian hotel room, Miranda receives a call from Clark at Severn City Airport. They discuss Arthur, with Clark revealing their recent dinner where he defended Miranda as an artist. Miranda, coughing, warns Clark about the airport's isolation and urges him to help Tyler and Elizabeth. She explains how she went to Chicago to print the book and was planning to send him a copy. Miranda leaves her room to help Jim, who's dying with a fallen filling. They discover through the FAA website that a second plane has landed at Severn City Airport, potentially carrying infected passengers. Miranda desperately attempts to contact the pilot, Captain Hugo Bennett, to prevent passengers from disembarking. Jim helps her remember the phone number as her laptop dies. At the Museum of Civilization, the traveling symphony completes their 8-day quarantine. Walking through rooms filled with plants, they discover the aftermath of an electrical fire in the museum, which severely burned Clark's arms. Miles explains they're switching to vegetable oil to prevent another dark night. Kirsten confronts Elizabeth about Sarah's condition and their imprisonment, eventually convincing Elizabeth to let her direct Hamlet, with Elizabeth as Gertrude and Tyler as Hamlet. Dr. Jeevan tends to Clark's burns and meets Sarah, who accepts her fate.
What are you feeling, Sarah?
He holds her hand as she dies during a power outage. Meanwhile, Kirsten visits Tyler in his confinement room, giving him the script and encouraging him to focus on Act 3, Scene 4. Mother and son rehearse together, showing the first signs of reconciliation as Tyler acknowledges her as his mother. Clark initially resists the casting choices, but relents after Kirsten shows him Miranda's Station 11 book and reminds him of Arthur's love for both her and Tyler. She reveals her connection to Arthur through King Lear, where she played young Goneril and was nicknamed Kiki. The play begins with careful preparations, Alex giving Tyler Kirsten's knife, which he conceals. During the crucial scene, Tyler approaches Clark and Elizabeth, delivering his lines while remembering when Elizabeth first gave him Miranda's book. He threatens Clark with a knife, but drops it when Clark quietly admits he loved him too. Elizabeth begs Tyler to stay with them.
I loved him too, Tyler.
After the performance, Kirsten encounters one of Tyler's young followers carrying landmines. She shares news of Sarah's death in the Station 11 book, explaining how the prophecy originated from its pages. The girl joins her in reading it. Meanwhile, Tyler and Elizabeth have an emotional reconciliation, with Tyler apologizing for burning the tower and Elizabeth expressing regret for not leaving with him earlier. When Tyler asks her to come with him now, she agrees without hesitation. The episode weaves in Miranda's final moments in Malaysia. She convinces Captain Hugo Bennett to keep his passengers locked in the plane by sharing her own story of surviving a hurricane that killed her family. She explains how she survived by being at the counter coloring while a live wire killed her family. Miranda dies in her hotel room after completing this vital mission. The traveling symphony holds a musical memorial for Sarah, during which Kirsten spots Jeevan in the crowd. They share an emotional reunion. The next day, the symphony prepares to leave, taking Sarah's coffin with them. Alex bids an emotional farewell to Kirsten, choosing to ride with Tyler, Elizabeth, and the children, who leave their landmines behind as a symbol of abandoning their past. Clark says goodbye to Elizabeth and Tyler, while Kirsten and Jeevan walk together behind the caravan. Jeevan explains he lives on Delano Island with Lara and his family, whom he's told all about Kirsten. She invites him to bring his family to the airport when the symphony returns next year on their wheel. They share a final goodbye before parting ways, with Jeevan heading home and Kirsten continuing with her traveling family. The episode ends with multiple circles closing, the Station 11 book finding new readers, families reuniting and separating, and characters finding peace with their past while moving toward their futures. The story concludes with Brian reciting lines, the group honoring Sarah's memory, and the characters dispersing toward their separate destinies. And that's it for Station 11. Thanks for sticking around till the end, you're awesome. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to check out some of my other videos. There's plenty more exciting stories waiting for you, so go ahead and dive in. Until next time, take care and keep exploring great stories. See you soon.